They laughed at her like she didn't belong, until they saw the patch on her jacket, and suddenly no one made a sound. The laughter hit her first, sharp, loud, and careless, cutting through the evening air like a blade. It echoed across the roadside diner parking lot, bouncing off chrome and leather, until it landed squarely on her shoulders. A teenage girl, barely 16, stood frozen beside her old, rattling motorcycle, her oversized jacket hanging awkwardly on her thin frame. To them, she looked like a joke, but they didn't know what that jacket carried. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us not to judge too quickly, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps these stories reach more hearts that need them. She had pulled into the lot just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The place was filled with seasoned bikers, men with thick beards, worn boots, and years carved into their faces. Their bikes gleamed under the fading light, symbols of pride and freedom. And then there was her, small, quiet, and out of place. Her motorcycle coughed as it came to a stop, its engine sounding tired, much like her. The bike wasn't pretty, its paint was chipped, the seat slightly torn, and one mirror hung loosely. But she handled it with care, like it was the most valuable thing she owned, because to her, it was. She slid off slowly, adjusting the sleeves of her jacket. It was too big, clearly not hers originally. The leather was worn, the edges cracked, but it was clean, cared for. On the back, barely visible in the dim light, was a stitched patch, but no one noticed that yet. What they noticed was her age, her size, and the way she didn't belong. The laughter started with one man and quickly spread. A few leaned against their bikes, shaking their heads. Others exchanged amused glances, their smirks growing wider. To them, she was just a kid playing dress-up, trying to step into a world she didn't understand. She kept her eyes down and walked toward the diner entrance, her boots scuffing lightly against the pavement. Every step felt heavier under the weight of their judgment. But she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. Inside, the diner was warm, filled with the smell of coffee and fried food. A few heads turned as she entered, but the laughter stayed outside. She took a seat in the corner, placing her helmet gently on the table. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it by wrapping them around a cup of water. This wasn't her first time being looked at like that. She had grown used to it, the whispers, the stares, the quiet assumptions. People saw her and decided who she was before she ever spoke a word. But today, it felt heavier. Maybe because she was tired, maybe because she was alone, or maybe because today mattered more than they could ever understand. Outside, the bikers continued their conversation, but something lingered in the air. One of them, older than the rest, leaned back and watched the diner door. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with mockery, but curiosity. Something about her didn't sit right with him. Eventually, the group began to disperse, some heading inside for food, others lingering near their bikes. As the door opened again, the girl stepped out, holding a small paper bag. She moved quickly, hoping to leave without drawing more attention. But it was too late. One of the men called out, his tone mocking, asking where she thought she was going on that scrap of a bike. The laughter returned, louder this time. She froze for a moment, her back still turned to them. Her grip tightened on the bag. Then, slowly, she turned around. For the first time, she met their eyes. There was no anger in her expression, no defiance. Just something deeper. Something that made the laughter falter, if only slightly. It was the kind of look that came from carrying more than your years allowed. She didn't say anything. Instead, she adjusted her jacket, the movement causing the back to shift fully into view. And that's when it happened. The laughter stopped. Not gradually, not awkwardly. It stopped all at once, like someone had cut the sound out of the world, because now they saw it. The patch. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't something you could buy or fake. It was a symbol, one that every biker in that lot recognized instantly. A mark of belonging to a brotherhood built on loyalty, sacrifice, and respect. A patch that wasn't given lightly, and never to someone who hadn't earned it. Their expressions changed. Smirks faded. Postures straightened. The older man stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the patch. There was disbelief there, but also something else. Recognition. The girl stood still, letting the silence settle. For a moment it felt like the world was holding its breath. She turned back around without a word and walked toward her bike. This time no one laughed. As she placed the paper bag into her saddle compartment, her movements were careful, deliberate. Everything she did carried a quiet weight. The older man approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. He didn't speak immediately, he didn't need to. He had seen that patch before, years ago, on a man who rode harder than anyone else. A man who had earned respect not through words, but through actions. A man who had stood for something. A man who was gone. The realization hit him like a wave. The girl mounted her bike, adjusting her helmet. For a second she hesitated, as if debating whether to say something. But then she simply started the engine. It roared to life, louder than before, almost defiant. As she pulled away, the older man raised his hand slightly, not to stop her, but in acknowledgement. A silent gesture of respect. The others followed his lead. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She rode off into the fading light, the patch on her back catching the last rays of the sun. It wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was a story, a legacy, a reminder that strength doesn't always look the way you expect. Inside her jacket, close to her heart, was a small folded letter. She had read it 100 times, memorized every word. It was from her father, the man who had once worn that patch, the man who had taught her how to ride, how to stand tall, and how to keep going even when the road got hard. He had told her that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you carried, quietly, until others had no choice but to see it. Tonight, she had done exactly that. And those who laughed, they would remember this moment, because sometimes the loudest lesson comes from the quietest person. Before we reach the end, take a moment to comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you think. The road stretched ahead of her, long and uncertain, but for the first time in a while, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel out of place. She felt seen. And somewhere behind her, in a parking lot that had once echoed with laughter, there was now only silence and respect. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that we never truly know someone's journey, and a little kindness can change everything. Because sometimes, all it takes is one patch to tell a story the world will never forget.